Onions come in a lot of varieties. We have the white variety and we have the Burgundy variety. Both these varieties are excellent to grow in your garden. So these are the onion sets we will be using to grow our white onions. So when growing onions from sets, the advantage is that you've already got a head start into the growing part of the plant. When you grow onions from seeds, it takes a long time for the bulbs to reach the size that you're looking at. So to grow onion sets, what the companies that sell you the onion sets do is they plant a lot of onion plants very close to each other, and then when the bulbs become of this size that you see here, they remove them and they sell these bulbs to you. Now when you're planting onion sets, just plant them not very deep, but just so that the top part of the onion set is visible, and this will give you the biggest bulbs from your onion plants. And this is the other container that we will be growing our onion sets in. This is a pretty wide container, about 6 inches deep, and is really ideal for growing onion sets. You can grow onions twice a year in places like California. You can plant them in the fall for an early spring or spring harvest, and you can also plant them in the spring season for a late summer or fall harvest. There are different onion varieties, and each onion variety has a different maturity period, so they take different times to reach maturity. Now if you're using a slow release fertilizer, it's a good time to mix it into your soil because the onion sets will start sprouting very quickly. As you can see here, within 10 days the sets have sprouted pretty well and are growing very nicely. So they will need the nutrients in the soil. If you're using liquid fertilizers, you need to make sure that as soon as you see these shoots coming up, it's time to add some liquid fertilizer for your onions. So whether you're using organic fertilizers or inorganic fertilizers, remember that fertilizers are very important for plants to grow well and produce whatever they're producing, whether it's leaves or shoots or bulbs. So 30 days since planting, you will see that the plants are well established, and if some of your onion sets do not send out shoots, it usually means that they have been spoiled or they're rotting or they're just not viable. So you can replace them with some sets that are actually good. And you can see it has produced this nice lush green leaves, and you can actually go ahead and harvest these leaves. Although there are some onion varieties that are specifically bred for their leaves, I've noticed that almost any onion plant will give you nice and edible leaves. And here you can see we've harvested these leaves, and the plant will grow back these leaves in no time. So do not worry about harvesting the leaves. You can use as many as you want. And after 165 days, it's now time for the harvest. Now if you've watched my earlier videos on growing onions, and I'll post a link to those videos at the end of this video, you might have known the technique that you use to harvest onions. And as you can see here, you basically remove the onions. You can trigger dormancy by breaking their tops for some onion varieties. However, I noticed that these onions were actually mature already, and that's why I began harvesting these onions right away. So these containers are very small, as you can see, and this was still a decent harvest. And let's look at the other container. This was the wider container. Again, not as tall or not as deep. It's about 6 to 7 inches deep. But still the onion bulbs were able to grow very well in this container. Now when you're harvesting onions, you might notice that some bulbs might be smaller than the others, and that's perfectly normal when you're growing onions at home. Do not worry about that. And once the onions are ready and harvested, you can dry them in an open ventilated area like your garage. Now these onions have been harvested and are drying for about 2 to 3 weeks, and you can use them as needed, and they will store very well for months to come. So for our next variety of onions, that is the red Burgundy onions, which is one of my favorite onion varieties because it's really pungent and really nice. We will be using seeds. So you can start onions about 6 to 8 weeks before your fall season or before your spring season, because it takes about 6 to 8 weeks for the seeds to sprout and grow into these small plants, which you can easily transplant into your garden or into your containers, raised beds. You can grow onions pretty much in any medium that you want. So we will sow a few seeds in this seed starting kit and then wait for them to germinate. And I'm keeping my seed starting kit in a little greenhouse, and I've done a review of this greenhouse. It's a nice little greenhouse that I've been using for many years now. So the plants are ready to be transplanted in about 8 weeks. As you can see here, these plants have grown pretty large and are now ready to be transplanted. And onions are very versatile plants. They can be grown in any container as long as it's about 8 to 10 inches deep. And wider containers are preferable because they give the onion plants a lot more area to grow well. Now, onions taste very different depending on their colors. So the white and the red onions are mostly pungent. I usually like the pungent taste of both the white and the red onions. The yellow onions are more of the sweeter variety. They taste a lot sweet, and some people do like the sweet taste of those onions. So just like the white onion variety, you can harvest the leaves of this red Burgundy onion variety. And what's interesting is that even the leaves of the onions taste a little bit different depending on the onion variety. And you can be the best judge. Just take some leaves off the onions and cook them, see how you find it. You can even eat them raw, chopped. You can put them in salads, you can put them in soups. There are a lot of things you can do with just the onion leaves as well. And this is one thing I like about growing onions. You can harvest the onion leaves right throughout the growing season and still get some good sized bulbs. Now this Burgundy onion variety is a smaller bulbing kind of onion, which means that it won't produce huge bulbs. However, it's much easier to grow and produces some really delicious onions. So here you see the step of inducing dormancy in these onion plants. So what you basically do is just bend the onion plants at their necks, and this triggers dormancy and tells the plant to stop producing leaves and concentrate its energy on the bulbs. So this increases the bulb size slightly for these onions, and after a few days you can go ahead and harvest these onions. And as you can see, these are not huge onions. These bulbs are pretty small, and different onion varieties have different sized bulbs. So make sure when choosing your seeds that the kind of onion that you want to grow is a large bulbing kind of onion or small to medium sized onions. And there is no onion better or worse than the others. They're just different. These onions taste absolutely amazing. My favorite again is the Burgundy onion variety. It not only looks very good, these onions look pretty amazing when they're sliced. They also taste very nice. And as I mentioned, it's up to your taste. You want to grow sweeter onions, you can grow the yellow variety. If you want the more pungent varieties, you can grow the white and the Burgundy onions. And what you do after harvesting is that you remove the roots and the tops of the plant, and then once that's done, you will be curing them. And curing onions just means that after the harvest, you dry the onions and you make it ready for storage. So the first step in curing is to just sun dry these onions for a few days. You do not have to keep it out in the sun for a very long time, especially if you have very hot summers. But you can dry these till the outer surface of the onion starts becoming brittle, and then keep it in a well ventilated area for about 2 weeks. And this is what the onions look like after 2 weeks. Again, these are small to medium sized onions, and they will store great for a few weeks or even a few months ahead. So I hope you enjoyed this episode on watching these 2 onion varieties, and I'd like to know from you, what onion varieties do you like to grow? And I'll see you again soon. Happy gardening.